From the National Catholic Register, this is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
We are now only days away from the conclave to elect the successor to Pope Francis. The cardinals have gathered in Rome and are preparing to enter the Sistine Chapel on Wednesday, May 7th. This week on Register Radio, we're joined by Edward Pentin, senior Vatican reporter for the National Catholic Register. Hello, I'm Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News, and I'm so grateful that you could join me. Well, we are, as I said, preparing for a conclave. That means the cardinals, 133 of them at latest count, are preparing to do one of the most solemn duties that they have as members of the College of Cardinals, and that is to choose a successor to Pope Francis. I'm joined this week by Edward Pentin. Edward, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Matthew, good to be with you.
So here we are. When you and I, the day after Easter, began receiving phone calls about the passing of Pope Francis, it came obviously as a bit of a surprise since it seemed that he had been recovering.
Yes.
Where were you when you found out?
I was in England, of course. I was there. We were all, as you say, we were all expecting this in a way, because he looked so sick on Easter Sunday. And I got a message actually from a source in the Vatican shortly before he died, saying his condition has worsened. So I was all alert to hear what could happen. And then it was literally half an hour later that we got the statement from Cardinal Farrell saying that we're going to meet in the chapel and announce the news. So yeah, that was what I heard.
So the death was not necessarily unexpected.
No.
He had seemed to be recovering, though, and then I think in some ways made the decision to be with his people. Would you say that's fair? And even though I think he was aware of the toll it might take.
Yes, I think it was very interesting watching him going around the square. I mean, it was very brave of him to do that, because he was obviously very poorly. And I think he wasn't himself. It seemed to be very drugged up or something. It was very difficult for him to move, it seemed. Yes, so I think, he was really clearly in his last days.
Yeah, he seemed to have spent his last few days in so many ways, the way he governed, the way he served as Pope. I'm thinking especially of that little adventure he had in St. Peter's Basilica, where he was apparently out for a constitutional in the wheelchair and decided to go visit the tomb of St. Pius X, but he obviously was not dressed in the traditional papal white.
Yes.
So they had sort of a poncho.
Right.
How was that emblematic of Francis to you?
Well, he did everything. He tried to sort of break conventional or traditional practices, and I think that was very much part of that. And he was always pushing the boundaries, always trying to go and really trying to bring the papacy to the people. Of course, that was controversial. There was a sense, I think, that he didn't necessarily distinguish, perhaps intentionally, perhaps not, between the office and the person, and the need to keep the dignity of the office alive, keep the certain mystery of the dignity of the office of the papacy, and have that as separate to the person himself, the papacy and the person. And I think that became very blurred, and in some ways it brought it to the people, but at the same time it lessened that crucial part of the papacy, I think. And I think that was a common observation.
Yeah. What is your assessment of this pontificate at this point? What will be his legacy?
I think it will be primarily mercy. I think his emphasis on mercy was very strong, at least in the image to the world. I don't think he was seen necessarily as particularly merciful in the Vatican, let's say. I think his governing style was considered problematic in that regard. But certainly the image that he gave of reaching out to everybody, loving everybody, including them and welcoming them, I think will probably be his lasting legacy, and especially the poor, the most vulnerable, those who had seemed to have been forgotten. I don't think that there was a common misconception, I think, that the Church had forgotten that group. Of course, the Church has never forgotten. That's always been the Church's mission. But he, in a way, he kind of, in this world where perception is everything. He managed to get the church to be perceived as what she truly is, which is helping the poorest of the poor. So I think that will be one of his lasting fruits, I'd say, yeah.
And his journeys to the peripheria, the peripheries, as he liked to say. What do you think of that?
Well, that's all part of it too. I think it was all trying to reach out to those who were forgotten, ignored. I don't know if you remember, you probably remember, Matthew, that when Benedict was Pope, there was always talk about Eurocentrism. The church was too Eurocentric, too Western as well. And I think he wanted to try to bring the church to those parts of the world which, they weren't included in a major way in the running of the church and so forth. So that's why he brought in cardinals from far-flung places. And again, that's part of his legacy. It's very much part of the way he was trying to reach out to those people. Yeah, and I think that'll have a crucial. It's going to obviously have a crucial impact on the future of the church.
Yeah. And what does it mean that he was Latin American, and looking back now in these early days at the end of this pontificate?
I think it certainly put Latin America on the map in the church. I think maybe again that was kind of cast aside. I think for many centuries, it wasn't really part of the internal structure and the governing structure of the church. So that's been a very important influence into the church. Whether we'll have another one, we don't know. But certainly it added certain amount to the church, I think. Yeah.
And what do you consider to be some of the most important of his writings?
Well, I think that it's important in the sense of controversial. There's that, and then there's important in the sense of how much they've moved humanity on, moved the church on, and helped people's salvation.
Right.
I think controversially, of course, we had Amoris Laetitia, which I think was probably one of the most important in the sense that it seemed to have changed quite a lot, even though it was said there wasn't much change. I think it did move the needle in a way which obviously a lot of people didn't agree with. And then possibly Fratelli Tutti was significant. Again, trying to bring people together, trying to bring harmony. Again, there was problems with that. I know we've probably discussed that before, but I think those are possibly the main documents that I'll probably think of some more as we're talking. But that's what I can think of.
Yeah, Laudato Si is often mentioned too.
Yes. Though I don't know how much impact that's going to really have. I think the whole environmental thing seems to be waning a little bit. So certainly had an impact, but whether it'll have a lasting one, I'm not so sure.
Right. So with Amoris Laetitia, especially worth talking about, I think, not just for the controversy of certain footnotes, and this is, of course, is his post-synodal apostolic exhortation on the family that raised the specter, opened the door potentially for granting communion to those who are divorced and remarried.
Yes.
Without having obviously attained an annulment. But it also strikes me as that was one of the very rare occasions that Pope Francis, at some point in the discussions leading up to it, brought all of the cardinals together.
Yes. Was that unprecedented? I don't think it was.
Well, I mean, in terms of the Pope Francis's pontificate, that he did not very often like to gather the cardinals.
Yes. Oh, well, yes, that's very true. And in fact, that was a watermark there, because it was that from that point on they didn't meet, and I think it was because of the backlash against Amoris Laetitia that he decided not to have them meet, because I think they didn't really want to deal with the criticisms, I think, of it. So unfortunately, yes, that was part of the fallout of it.
Right, and then that was followed, of course, by the exhortation itself that created a firestorm. And then I think he brought them in 22 together, but that was really more for them, as one cardinal said to me quietly, that we were brought here pretty much just to be lectured.
Indeed, yes, exactly.
on synodality.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that was really the only other opportunity they had to be together. Yeah, but there wasn't many chances to meet. Yeah.
So that means essentially that they don't know each other.
No, exactly, and this is a big concern in a sense, because there are more in this conclave than ever, I think, of 133. voting. So it's a big number, and they come from these disparate parts of the world now, and they haven't had a chance to get to know each other. So yes, it's a significant factor in this conclave. Yeah.
So let's talk briefly about the funeral itself, the farewell to Pope Francis. What was your assessment of the funeral itself?
Well, I thought Cardinal Ray, the Dean who gave the homily, I thought he gave a good summary, really, of what the Pope had done. He didn't really, interestingly, talk much about him as a person. It was about what he'd done, and just gave a good sort of précis of all of that, which was interesting. I think it was helpful for those listening. There was, of course, that concern about when he talks about the Pope praying, when he used to tell us to pray for him, and then Cardinal Ray said, well, he'll be praying for us. I think that was a bit of a concern, because, of course, we don't know. That it's not Catholic teaching that we hope that he's in a good place, but we pray for him, the hope that he's there. But anyway, that was something.
Well, I remember that I think it was then Archbishop Leonardo Sandri as Sostituto in 2005 when he announced the death of Pope John Paul II.
That's right.
Of course, eventual Pope Saint John Paul II. He said that he has gone to the house of the Father.
Yes, that's right.
So it's certainly a nice thing to say.
It's a nice thing to say, but it's yes, it's a little bit imprecise to say theologically.
Right. And the procession to Santa Maria Maggiore and the tomb.
Yes.
What did you think of that?
Well, I thought that was it was totally novel. Of course, it hasn't been done for a long time. That a pope has been buried outside.
Yeah, about 100 years. Yeah.
Yes. So I think that was good. And it was very much in keeping with his pontificate, because he wanted to be a pope for the people and the theology of the people and all of that. And I think having that procession allowed the people to say their final goodbye, and many people turned out to see him. I think it was obviously a great help. That particular weekend was, I think it was the weekend for adolescents, part of the Jubilee. So there were and it was going to be Carlo Acutis' canonization. So it was there were lots of young people already there and many families there. So they could say their farewells to him.
Yeah, it was a remarkable farewell, and Francis, being Francis, wanted to be close to the Salus Populi Romani, where he would pray every time he left Rome, every time he came back to Rome, and so he will be, I think by my count, the 9th Pope to be buried, or is now the 9th Pope to be buried in Santa Maria Maggiore.
Yes, that's right, and of course that was very dear to him, that basilica, and he'd go there before each trip and after each trip. Yeah.
Well, you're listening to Register Radio here on EWTN Radio. We're going to take a quick break and continue our conversation with Edward Pentin, Senior Vatican Analyst for the National Catholic Register. Don't go anywhere.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
And welcome back to Register Radio. I'm Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director for EWTN News and host of Register Radio. Continuing my conversation with Edward Pentin, Senior Vatican Analyst or Contributor. I know you have a variety of titles. You fill an immense space for us at the Register and EWTN News. Well, Ed, when we left just before the break, we were talking about Pope Francis's burial, and we're really in the process now, the slow process of really assessing his pontificate. And I know you've written extensively about it, obviously, over more than a decade now.
Yeah. Yes. Well, what struck me as well about his pontificate was just how revealing it was. It sort of brought everything out into the open. It was. Austin Ivory wrote that biography called The Great Reformer. I've always thought of him as the great revealer, in a sense, because so much of what was under the surface during the other pontificates came to the surface and needed to in many ways. A lot of the problems, a lot of the corruptions, and whether it's the financial, the sexual abuse, the doctrinal problems too, they all kind of got exposed during Francis' pontificate. So I just think it's interesting that it all seemed to be allowed to happen under these 12 years, over these 12 years, and maybe it was sort of the Lord's permissive will to allow that just to happen. It's been painful, of course. I think many people have had it very, very difficult to to try to understand what's happening and try to, sort of realize what's going on and why. But I think that, to me at least, having observed it, I feel that's kind of a major part of it, and hopefully a good fruit to come from it in the next pontificate.
Yeah, and about that then, looking back on Pope Francis, obviously the cardinals have gathered here in Rome to begin the process of finding his successor. And obviously his governing style, his legacy, his achievements, all of that is in the mix, but they're also trying to decide the characteristics of who they're looking for.
Yes.
And I know you just wrote a piece for the Register on the very qualities potentially for another pope.
Yes, that's right. Well, I sort of look back. It's part of what I put in this book I wrote in 2020 called The Next Pope. And in the introduction, there's a part about how the qualities needed for a pope. And it was a look back at what has happened in the past, going back to the Middle Ages as well. And St. Bernard of Clairvaux had a very good list of, I think it's 5 or 6 points, where he talks about the qualities needed. And they're very much, a lot of them to do with virtue, personal virtue, and humility, and moral integrity, and these kinds of things, which I think the cardinals are looking at. Let's hope so anyway. I know that I asked Cardinal Ribat of Papua New Guinea, is personal holiness important? And he said, yes, personal holiness is very important to a pope. So I think that'll be high up for hopefully many of them. I think that has always been traditionally very important, the holiness and the ability to obviously govern as well. The 3 offices of the bishop, the sanctifying, teaching, and governing.
Right.
And I think they're probably looking at that this week in the general congregations. Who could be best to fulfill that role?
We have had a number of saints in the history of the Church attending conclaves.
Yes, indeed.
I think of Robert Bellarmine, I think of Charles Borromeo, and yet they were not elected.
Right, indeed.
Now, obviously we want our popes to be holy. We have had, I think, 83 or so popes who've been canonized, including a flurry of most recent ones.
Yes.
Pope St. John the 23rd, Pope St. Paul VI,
yes.
John Paul II, and even the cause for John Paul I has advanced very rapidly.
Indeed. Yeah.
Is it a requirement to be a saint to be pope?
Obviously it helps, doesn't it?
It helps in everything.
Yes. But I think it's interesting because I was talking to a church historian a few years ago about this, and he said, he was a little bit perturbed that John the 23rd and these others who've been canonized recently, and there's been many, as you say.
Yeah.
He was a bit perturbed by that because he said, well, for popes it's even harder because they have many more things to get right, and they have many things they get wrong, and they have huge responsibility. So it's, in a way, it's harder for them to be made a saint than the ordinary person. So, and
they certainly have more critics.
Certainly have more critics, yes. So whether it's, but that's sort of, looking back. But yes, looking forward, it would be. Those are the qualities, obviously, the ultimate qualities needed.
Yeah.
The exceptional qualities needed to be pope and to be hopefully a saint. Yeah.
So in this particular moment, obviously we want someone who's conspicuously holy, or who is holy, who is prayerful. But when we're looking for specific qualities here, how important is financial oversight and a capacity for administration? Because one fair criticism, I think, of Francis's pontificate was that there was a great deal of uncertainty and a lack of clarity at times, sort of in the administrative side of the Roman Curia and the
Vatican. Teaching too.
Yes, well, I was going to get to that in a minute.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and I think that there was you made it better than me, Matthew. I think probably because there was a pope. Was it Paul V or Pius V? One of those, I can't remember which, but he said it's better to have a pope who's a good administrator than a holy pope, because the pope really has to run the church. And so but so that may be better to have than that. But yeah, but obviously, if you can combine the both, that's
Exactly.
the ideal thing.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, John Paul II, by way of sort of comparison, was clearly a saint, but he did appoint people with the understanding that they were going to help him
Yes.
run the Vatican because he had many other things to do. But he was also very good at appointing the right people, wasn't he?
Yes, that's right. Yes, and that's crucial too, and being able to delegate and
Especially in the early part of his pontificate.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Yeah.
So we have also the requirement, it seems, of a pope who must be able and willing to travel.
Yes. Well, that's become a crucial part of it, hasn't it? Now, and of course, that's why Benedict. One of the reasons he gave for resigning, he couldn't go to World Youth Day in Brazil, so he felt, I can't do this anymore. So yes, that is a need, and languages too are very important. I think there's a hope that the next one will be able to speak English. Because that's been, that's always helpful
Right.
for us.
It sounds obvious, but would you consider not being able to speak Italian effectively disqualifying?
It certainly weakens it, because Italian is the lingua franca in the Vatican now, not Latin anymore. So yes, that would be important. I think they'd probably consider that quite an important factor.
Yeah. And then what else? What are the intangibles for a pope?
The intangibles, well, how do you mean? It's sort of...
Well, in the sense of what are the characteristics we've been talking about? A good administrator, obviously we want somebody who's very holy,
Yes.
somebody who can travel, somebody with languages. Is a terminal degree, for example, essential? I mean, we've in recent history, I think Blessed Pius IX didn't have a terminal degree, Pope Francis in the sense of a doctorate. Pope Francis didn't have a doctorate in that sense.
Yes.
So is that crucial? Does the Pope have to be
An intellectual.
an intellectual and or a well-seasoned theologian?
It doesn't have to be, of course. Of course, there's Peter the Fisherman wasn't.
Exactly.
So it all depends. And of course, the Lord, He gives us the Pope we need or deserve. Doesn't he? So I think whoever's best for the times, and it seems to be that since we talk about a fat Pope following a thin one, it's possibly likely that we'll get somebody who is more theologically astute, perhaps, than Francis was, because theology wasn't his thing, doctrine wasn't thing. It was much more about the heart and
Right.
the Jesuit way of thinking of approaching things. So I think that could well be the case for the next Pope. He'll be somebody more intellectual in that sense, possibly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So obviously names are being floated. There are rumors, which is true with every conclave, there are names. The dreaded word papabile is in use, but it has been for a number of years. Pope Francis even joked about that a couple of years ago when he was hospitalized.
Yes.
There's that other famous line that he who goes in, the Pope, comes out a cardinal.
Yes.
But that's not entirely true, is it?
No, it's not.
In modern history.
No, it's no. I think because I think was it Paul VI was predicted to be elected.
Yeah.
Certainly, Cardinal Ratzinger was towards the end of the time. He
Right.
was considered to be the front runner.
Eugenio Pacelli.
And Eugenio Pacelli
came in 1939, and just what I think,
Yes.
three ballots or so was elected
Yes.
Pius XII.
Yes.
But then there have been major surprises.
Yes.
Carol Wojtyła as John Paul II, and
Exactly.
of course Jorge Maria Bergoglio as Pope
Yes.
Francis.
Indeed.
So are we expecting, based on the people you've talked to, now we're days away from the start of the conclave, and much can happen, news can break in an instant, but are we expecting a shorter or a longer conclave at this point?
I think we're going to see well, who knows, of course, nobody knows, but I think it's possible that we'll have a slightly longer conclave because of the things we were talking about earlier, about the disparate backgrounds of the cardinals and so forth. But yes, I think it's going to be a slightly more complex, protracted conclave than usual.
Yeah. So in the brief amount of time, we have about a minute left.
Yes.
I want to make sure that we mention your website.
Yes, so we put together this website called the collegeofcardinalsreport.com, really to help the cardinals get to know each other, because as we've said, they don't. And so they can, if you go to the site, anyone can see it. You can look at their profiles, get an idea of who they are and where they stand on key issues. And they've been receiving copies of that as well. So there's a hope that will help them make an informed choice at the right time.
Yeah. All right. Well, Edward Pentin, I am grateful as always for your work. I know that you will be here pretty much for the duration for this conclave, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, up to the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Edward Pentin. The name of that website one more time.
Yes, the collegeofcardinalsreport.com.
Well, that's it for this week here on Register Radio. Thank you so much for joining me, and let's remember to pray for all the members of the College of Cardinals as they prepare for the conclave next week. On behalf of our producer, Michael McCall, and my co-host, Shannon Mullen, who wasn't able to join us this week, I'm Matthew Bunson. For more news, commentary, and analysis, be sure to go to ncregister.com. Until next week, please, take care and God bless.